ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vice President and Chief Digital Officer at GE Aviation, Jim Daly, and Operation Analytics Leader at flydubia, Julian Lafont.
Great. Okay. Well, Julian, first of all, welcome to Minds and Machines.
Thanks, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you here. I guess before we get started, I'd like to first of all thank you and thank flydubia for being such a great customer of GE Aviation, and also, and specifically, as we'll talk about today, it's such an outstanding collaboration partner for our digital solutions business. Okay. So I guess the first thing is I'll ask you a few questions, and then we'll actually show people what the actual solution that we've come up with together is and what we've collaborated on. So I think to start with, as flydubia continues to play an even more increasingly prominent role in the aviation sector, what challenges are you seeing in that industry, from an aviation perspective, specifically when it comes to airline operations?
Well, so flydubia is based out of one of the busiest airports in the world. We operate up to 43 different countries, from the Eastern Europe to India and Middle East, of course. So we're actually facing a lot of challenge like every other airlines. So operations are very complex. We have to take in consideration, obviously, the passengers when you have a disruption. You have to think about what you do with your aircraft, what you do with your crew. So I just said also our hub, Dubai, is obviously a very big airport, and we share that hub with major airlines in the industry. So the capacity is limited, and the time is actually very critical. Irregular operation in the airline industry now is becoming a norm. So you have every day is different. Every day brings a new challenge. Obviously, one thing that we all passengers, there is one thing that we look at is to always be on time. We'll always try to hope that we arrive on time. So for an airline, we'll try to maintain that as much as possible. And we were looking at a system that actually, for us, we would need our user to make a quick decision when we have a disruption to minimize actually the impact on our passengers and to serve our passengers as quickly as possible and keeping the best experience for everyone. And there is few new things in the market that actually completely changed the way we plan operation. Drones, for example, it's something we never thought about a few years ago, and that can affect any airline, and we had that 2 weeks ago. I'll show you a bit later, but we have all those complex tasks that are a difficult balance to find to try to get the best option for everyone.
Great. So obviously you outlined quite a few challenges there. So really when you looked at this team getting together in terms of the collaboration between the two companies, what were really the outcomes that you were looking to achieve?
So for us, we just needed a tool that could actually provide some visibility in terms of cost and how a disruption can impact on passenger for the rest of the day. So obviously, we needed a clear snapshot of what's happening on our operation when it comes to delay, when it comes to cancellation. But we need, for all these specific events, we actually needed to know what will be the welfare. What we consider the welfare is actually for example, the cost of a hotel, the cost of food that we need to provide to our passengers when there is this big disruption. And we need to know the knock-on effect to our network. So obviously, something which is critical for us is to find some kind of tool that could be smart and intuitive enough for the person behind to have a quick access to the data and easily read the data from. Obviously, like every system, every company, we have multiple systems, from the reservation system to operational system and many more. So on airline, we had to combine all this one. And how can we have a platform that could actually get that, provide guidance to the user, but also try to respect the airline policies?
Right. So if you look back on it, so today, what has been the experience as we kind of work together as a team to sort of come up with that solution, that outcome that you just described?
It was great. I mean, on both sides, from the first day we've been approached by GE, I think we had a very strong collaboration from the beginning. I believe, again, from the first day, GE listened to us and really tried to understand what was the main problem. We never had the feeling that there was something already existing, but more something that we could build together. So the team came over in Dubai a few times, tried to understand the issue, tried to understand what we would like to have, and how we could actually create a proper tool that could give a real change for everyone to handle disruption.
All right. So as you think back on that, and I appreciate that, it was a positive experience. I know it was for us in GE as well. I mean, what were really, if you look back, what were really the kind of critical factors, the things that really made the collaboration so far a success?
I think it was a learning process for both of us. Obviously, if you want to do something big with your data, you need to make sure you have access to your data. So that was the first challenge, is how to get complete, accurate, and timely data for what we were after. We're lucky because we had a great sponsorship from our Chief Operating Officer, Ken Guy. He was always behind us to try to put all this together and all the different people that need to or could actually give the most feedback behind. So flydubia is actually, I think we consider ourselves a bit of innovative airline and trying to build all this new technology and share with the business around. And together we just had to understand what if you could understand the decision or the impact of the decision that you're making on your operation. How can you learn from it, and how can you optimize actually for the next time you have a similar disruption?
Right. Okay, well, I appreciate that. And that's a lot to achieve, and a lot for these two teams to do. So I guess I'd ask you just, okay, why GE?
Well, why not GE? Actually, we were using you already for the engine data, obviously. So I think our engineering team is very close to you guys and what the data can come from our engines. We knew you were starting to build a lot of things on the digital side, so we were very curious about that. And you always shared with us that you had like all the necessary team behind to support us as much as we grow. So obviously we have in order 80 aircraft now coming in that will provide us even a bigger network soon. And what I liked after when we started that project was we always had this collaborative approach on trying to understand what you guys could do for us, but what we needed, and we always listened to each other. And finally, I think the expertise that you brought in that discussion changed a lot of things, and I think even internally we had a lot of discussion that since actually drove a lot of changes when it comes to the process that we have. So it was very useful for that, definitely.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you candidly sharing the challenges that you face in the process. So I guess without any further ado, why don't we take a look at the application?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Right.
Let me show you what we have. So we've developed that app on Predict a few months ago. And I will show you a scenario where we had, actually 2 weeks ago, we had a drone in our airspace. So the drone was actually, we closed the airspace for 2 hours. So us and other airlines, we've been affected by this big disruption, and we had many cancellations, diversions, etc. So what you see here is a bad day for us, really. Imagine that all those blocks are our flights, so it's just a snapshot of what we are doing. And you get all the flights that are critical for us. So you get the yellow blocks are all the flights that are over 15 minutes, which could be critical when it comes to connecting passengers, but are not that critical. The orange blocks are the ones that are an hour delay. So this hour delay is actually very critical in terms of, in terms of cost, because that's when we start to provide a bit of welfare to our customers, but also when we have a high risk of people missing their connection. And finally, the red blocks are actually the flights that are more than 3 hours delay. So what you can see on that screen actually is quite interesting. There is few icons that we wanted to see as a flag for the user. So the user in that case can actually be, on our side, it's the operation center, so they can see what's happening, they can see what will happen over the next few hours, but it's actually a very good point also on the executive level to actually have a quick view when they enter or when they connect to the tool to see, okay, how is the status of my operation now? I know I have disruption, how the day will look like, or how many of my flights will be disrupted. So you see there is few icons on those blocks. We've got a $ and a warning alert. So the $ is just a flag to tell us that this flight is probably a high cost to us in terms of welfare. Maybe there is a hotel reaccommodation. And the warning is for us to know, okay, this flight will have actually a risk of misconnecting passengers. So obviously that's when we need to be proactive and try to find what we do with those passengers before they come to the airport and they wait for a few hours before they get reprotected. So I'm going to show you a few things. That's, for example, a cancellation block. So on that day, we had canceled a lot of flights. You see just over here how many passengers were affected on that flight. So we had how many passengers, the welfare that was associated to this. Now I'm going to show you another example, which was a flight that we operated between Muscat and Dubai that had 3 hours of delay due to this airspace closure. We had 12 passengers, you can see at the bottom of that block, 12 passengers that were actually misconnected or had a risk to be misconnected. So what we wanted from that tool is to say, okay, give me actually something that help us to understand who are those 12 people, who are those 12 passengers, what can I do with those 12 passengers? So we looked at flight impact scenario. We can build for any flight that are on a network. We can choose that particular flight and input a delay to it and say, okay, what will be my knock-on effect here? So we can see just an overview of what's the welfare, misconnecting passengers, and then you can go into the detail and say, okay, well, those people that will miss their connection are actually going to those 3 different destinations. So we had Shalkot, Kuwait, and Tbilisi. And then for each of these passengers, you want to know actually what can you do with them. So you can press and it will tell you, all right, now you have these 6 passengers here in economy. Their choice or the next option is to fly on flight 337, which will give them a bit of delay, but at least you can reaccommodate them on another of your flights. So we do that for every destination. There was an interesting module that we wanted to look at. When we came across that project, we actually realized that a lot of cancellations here are often driven by experience or things that could have happened before. We would try to put some things that are more variable behind the decision that is made. So we defined key parameters that you can see on top. So I'm going to go through this quickly, but passenger spill is the passengers you cannot actually reprotect to your network within 24 hours. So you want to minimize the risk of canceling those kind of flights. So for us, this is critical. This is really the first one. Then you can play around with all those different index and try to see what actually is the impact or the flight that I could optimize here or cancel. So for example, here we run a scenario when we look at, okay, I want to know all the flights that have a fairly good revenue, but minimum passenger spill and a minimum estimated welfare. I know I will have a minimum cost associated to that. Now what you can do, what you can do is actually that particular tool will provide you the list of those flights that you selected based on the parameter you define. Now you can make a decision, and in that case, I think there is a flight to Muscat. There is no, or even the Bahrain flight is better. There is no connecting passengers. The welfare cost is the minimum, so that's the last flight here. We can sort this out, and then you can just say, okay, today, I know that if I take a decision on that flight to cancel it, it won't be too much a problem for everyone to look at it. Now what was important was, after a bad day, like what happened on drone, I often had questions from my CEO on, okay, how was the day, how much potentially this has cost us? So it was not very clear, and usually you had to dig a bit more into the data to try to find a real picture of what happened. So we tried to look at something that was scanning through all the flights that were affected, and give us a snapshot again on, okay, what was the cost for that particular day, how much did we lose, and what could have been, so here, what was the flight that cost me the most on that particular day? So I can see here, there is a flight that was almost 12,000 dirhams, which is more or less $5,000. And then we can say, okay, I want to know which one of my flight was the most affected. You can also filter to, sorry about that, oops. You can also filter based on the delay that you have on that flight. So finally, because we wanted that tool to be obviously on our side, it's mainly for the ops center, because they are the one who makes the decision, but we wanted the tool to be compatible with other departments within the company. And we say, okay, well, now we have a view from the operational point of view, but what if you can start and see something, well, the same thing, but in a different manner. So all those KPIs here are based on time, but we could actually choose based on the welfare. And suddenly the graph changed slightly. It's just for the financial team, for instance, just to be able to know, all right, now I know what is my day like. Will it be a bad day, or will it cost me a lot? Another thing that we realized was actually quite important to see is because you get the data live, you can actually see what's the impact on your network, and in a few hours' time, you can see, okay, now there is a risk. For example, let's say I'm at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I know there is a risk here around 7 o'clock that I will have 4 flights with misconnection. Then we can actually send this information back to the airport staff and say, look, get ready, just maybe get more people, but unfortunately, that time will be a bad time. So you have an hour, you have a lot of people that you have to make sure you get the proper workforce for, and then we can work on that. So now, that's a phase 1 we have. Phase 2 for us is we're trying to bring, obviously, when there is a decision that you're making, there is a other factor. We try to bring maintenance system in. We will try to bring the crew scheduling team to see also what's the impact on your crew when you make that decision. And so, yeah, I think there is a long process to make that disruption tool fully functional, but I think there is a great challenge ahead, and we will continue that path with you guys, so thank you for that.
No, I appreciate you showing this, Julian. I appreciate, like you said, the road ahead as we continue to partner together and work going forward. I think most of the audience could probably relate to some degree of upsets when they've flown. And as a frequent flyer, I know personally I'm extremely excited that flydubai chose the first project to be one that really attacks how we can minimize the impact on the flying public, and specifically, as you said, you're focused on the welfare of the passenger. That's a big deal, and I know personally, thank you for that. I really do appreciate that. But really, once again, thanks for this. We've loved the collaboration, the partnership, and really look forward to it moving forward. So thanks so much.
Good.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks.